Thank you for joining us today. I'm Keith Garner. Now, we often hear about the hidden faces of homelessness, but today I want you to consider the hidden faces of drug addiction. Now, that is a very challenging subject. Quite often we think about somebody who may be struggling with a drug addiction of some kind. We think of a person who is perhaps on the street or somebody who is continually struggling outwardly to make ends meet. Now, Elizabeth Moldovan described herself as a non-stereotypical addict. She was a housewife, she was a caring mother of 5 children, and all the while she had an addiction to heroin. I'll be speaking with Elizabeth later in the programme and looking at how her life changed when her faith became real to her. And in just a few moments, we'll be looking at an innovative programme that we run here at Wesley Mission called Take Charge of Your Life, and hearing the story of Jessica Wilson, a young person who's come into our care. Later in the programme, we'll be joined by Craig Gower and Deb Ezzy-Walton, who'll sing Jesus, You Gave It All. And I'll share some thoughts in my exploration of a splendid parable of 2 people who went up to pray at the temple. They had very different attitudes. One is a tax collector and the other's a Pharisee. The story would have been shocking to those who heard it for the very first time. Let's enjoy looking at it together later in the programme. At Wesley Mission, the Take Charge of Your Life programme seeks to help young people make the transition from living in foster care to living as independent adults. This is Jessica's story.
My name is Nigel Lindsay. I'm the Executive Manager and Principal Officer for Wesley Dalmar. A range of programs and services fall under my responsibility. We've got out-of-home care, foster care, residential care, Good Aunties and Uncles project, but in total we're caring for just over 670 children and young people. The care system caters really well for children up to the age of 18. Once their order expires, there's a whole lot of opportunities that aren't open to them. They're often out on their own, often trying to find places to live, often trying to find some barriers to employment, and often haven't got a lack of appropriate relationships where they can fall back on. If it was your own children, they come back and talk to you. But for children in care, they should have at least those sorts of options that we've got.
I was removed when I was 5 years of age with my siblings. It was horrendous, being removed from your birth family. Not understanding at the time is obviously going to be very traumatic. I was actually restored to my birth mother 3 times. All of those restorations unfortunately failed, which made us then go into long-term care. I never learned how to trust, I never learned how to build relationships. I didn't know how to have, conversations, build relationships, maintain relationships. I had no conflict resolution skills or anything like that. I was just a very, very damaged little girl. I left my last foster family when I was around 18, 19, so I just finished my HSC, and it was basically just a relationship breakdown. The financial struggle was hard. I think that's one of the main burdens on young people. This financial stress and financial pressure that you don't expect will come of you, and suddenly you're responsible for every single thing in your life financially. And if you're trying to work, study, look for work, it's extremely difficult. And I didn't have the parents or the foster family that I could go back to and borrow money. So I had to do everything just for myself and just try to make ends meet. And it did mean going without a lot of things as well.
The statistics tell us quite clearly, children as they leave the care system don't do so well. We're talking 35% of children and young people are actually homeless once they leave the care system come 18. 65% of children and young people actually don't even finish their HSC. And again, 29% of children and young people are actually unemployed compared to the national average of around 10%.
Wesley Take Charge of Your Life would have been amazing back then, because it really would have equipped me with the skills that I needed to transition to a successful, adulthood, and not only just on a basic life skill level, the relationship, the coaching, the emotional coaching, learning how to have successful relationships. So I think it would have been fantastic back then. It's a pity that it wasn't around then.
Wesley Take Charge of Your Life project really is about the young people and their potential. But to do that, we've got to actually invest in such simple things as basic living skills. We're talking budgeting, we're talking cooking, we're talking cleaning, we're talking how to gain accommodation, how to maintain that accommodation, how to build relationships, how to look for a job, how to write a resume. Basic life skills are the building block for everywhere we'll go further with that project. As a parent, we all know that we invest in our own children. We'll invest in them for a lifelong commitment. That should be no different to the children and young people that exit the care system. We've got a duty of care as an organisation and as a community to actually build on that investment. They're worth it.
If you would like to see more of the work of Wesley Mission, visit wesleymission.org.au. You can watch loads more videos, catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact TV, find out about our diverse range of services, and get involved to help make a positive difference in your community. You can also connect with us on social media and stay up to date on the latest news and information from Wesley Mission. wesleymission.org.au.
Please do contact us if you'd like to be in touch for any reason. The email address is on our website, wesleymission.org.au. And I mentioned earlier that the hidden face of homelessness is something that we talk about often when someone is homeless, but they don't appear to be so. They spend much of their time couch surfing, moving between temporary accommodation, but they don't have a fixed address. On the outside, everything looks fine, but on the inside, it's a very different story. Well, it's a similar scenario with drug addiction for some people. Quite often, somebody who we've known for a long time may well have a drug addiction or be battling with an addiction of some kind, but we've been none the wiser. On the outside, everything looks fine. However, on the inside, it's a very different story. Elizabeth Moldovan is a person who's journeyed the hidden face of drug addiction and today joins me. Elizabeth, thank you for your time. You've written a book called The Prodigal Daughter. Tell us a little bit of your story. You're a mother of 5 children. Yes. You're a wife and you're raising your family, and yet you have an addiction to heroin. How did all that start for you?
I was looking for a good dad for my little 3-year-old son at the time, and I fell in love with him, but he was already an addict.
And that can often be the case for many people, can it? That they come into contact with somebody who they perhaps think is going to be a way forward, but in fact it's not a way forward.
No.
How is it possible? This is the real question. I've read, the book. I've listened to talking to you. How is it possible for 24 years to have an addiction and lots of people not even know about it?
We just hid it from people, and because we were reasonably well dressed and tried to keep it together for most of the time, people didn't know.
And they make many of their judgments about a person from what they see just in front of them.
Yes, it was a false image. Yeah.
So through that period of time, were you all the time hoping I could just get off this? Was that something that you wanted to do, or did it become more real as time went on?
There were a few times where I sought help, but I didn't believe there was anybody that cared enough to help. And by the end of the 24 years, I'd forgotten I had free will, and I thought I was a lost cause.
Look, you just said something there about help. If I were to ask this question, it may sound a bit naive, but is there really help out there?
So much help. So much help.
And it takes on your part the decision to seek it and want it?
That's it. And ask for it. And people will help. There's good psychologists, there's the Salvation Army, there's Wesley Mission, there's counsellors, there's doctors, there's meetings.
So tell me a little bit about how faith, which is important to you, it's not a simple answer. You don't believe just somebody believes and that's it, they can give up the drugs. But how important was faith to you in that journey?
Well, faith was everything. Faith was everything, and Jesus set me free.
And not only set you free, but it gave you the power to be able to handle the difficult times.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, if I call it the cold turkey, the going off, that is not the easiest way to handle any issue, is it?
No,
to
it's not.
stop, you know?
No, it's not. And not with my 3-year-old by my side either, all the time. It was excruciating. But, you know, prayer helped a lot.
And people were important in that story.
Very important. And for me to become reconnected with society as myself and not hiding anymore, being honest about.
I think that's one of the interesting parts of your story, the reconnection, because clearly drug addiction, alcohol, or any one of many things can make you feel cut off, can't it?
Yes, very cut off. And whether that was self-imposed or whether we just withdraw into the darkness and try to hide. But once reconnection happens with other people and with your community, and we all need to be connected, we all need to feel accepted.
Somebody who's watching and they're struggling with drug addiction of some kind,
Yes.
what would you say to them in a sentence or two?
I would say, just ask for help. Ask for help, and God will help you find the right people.
So thank you ever so much for sharing
Thank you
that
for
story. It's a
inviting me.
connection with two, asking God to help and seeking other people to help. Elizabeth, thank you for your
Thank you, Kate.
openness and honesty
Thank
and
you.
willingness to write your book, The Prodigal Daughter, and details about that can be found.
Thank you, Kate.
Please do stay with us. I'd like to touch base with you at the end of the programme. And please now welcome Craig Gower and Deb Ezzy-Walton from the Wesley Impact Band to sing Jesus, You Gave It All.
Lord, I lift my voice in praise to you for the love you've placed inside of me. Lord, I give my life, my heart and soul to you alone. And with every breath that comes from me will flow your mercy and your grace, proclaiming love and liberty for all who have an ear to hear. And your
I chose to volunteer at Wesley Mission because I'm passionate about justice.
I chose to volunteer with Wesley Mission because I've always wanted to work with people who have a disability.
You meet friendly people. They're all people who are self-motivated and energetic.
It not only gives me a purpose, keeps me active, and activity leads to longevity.
Wesley Mission currently provide over 130 individual services with over 2,000 employees, supported by over 3,000 volunteers to assist over 21,000 families and individuals each year. Whew, that's a lot of numbers. So as you can imagine, we are always looking for more volunteers to help. So please, volunteer today. Visit our website, wesleymission.org.au. You will not only be meeting new and interesting people, but you will be doing all the good you can, because every life matters.
It's been 200 years since the first Methodists met in Australia. To celebrate 2 centuries of faith and pioneering care, CEO and presenter Reverend Dr. Keith Garner takes us back to where it all began.
But we don't begin here at the heart of London. We begin in a town in the north of England.
In this fascinating narrative, Reverend Garner chronicles the history of the life and times of the founder of Methodism, John Wesley. This fresh and thought-provoking documentary takes us on a journey throughout the United Kingdom, beginning in John Wesley's hometown of Epworth.
John Wesley was born here on the 17th of June, 1703.
This 1-hour DVD travels onto his education years and beginnings of social justice in Oxford, to his final years in London. For more information on John Wesley, the man and his mission, call 02 9263 5555 or email us at impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
Once again, Luke gives us an insight as to who he's teaching to and for. I think that's always interesting when we get that little introduction. Tells us in Luke 18, verse 9, very important verse, to some who are confident of their own righteousness and who look down on everyone else, Jesus told this parable. Well, let me read on a little bit in the parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. It's good in a way that Luke doesn't mention a specific group. And one writer commented, we've got to resist the temptation of making the Pharisee a chump and the tax collector a hero. Now, for me, that would undermine the surprise of God's grace. For God's grace is always a surprise. And in the parable, that clearly comes through. You see, the parable needs not so much an interpretation as an observation. So when we hear that parable, we don't need a teacher or a preacher to say, this means this and this. Just watch it and look at it and see how you can gain from it so much of what it is that's important about life. You've got these 2 characters. They'd be easily identified by the first readers. Even if we find it needs a little explanation, they would easily be understood by those people watching for the first time. You see, the Pharisee follows the custom of praying in the temple when he stands to pray. It's a bit odd for some of us. In some parts of the world, people stand, but he stands to pray. Tells us quite clearly, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed. God, I thank you that I'm not like the other people. Oh, gosh, what a prayer. You can hardly imagine wanting to pray that, can you? But because many of us would have exactly the opposite feeling. But there he was, standing by himself, praying, I thank you, I'm not like the others. Now, the tax collector stood at the back of the temple. He's almost wanting to hide. His face is downcast. He beats his breast in remorse. He knows exactly who he is. He doesn't need anybody to say, now be careful, tax collector, we know you're a sinner, we know you're bad. He knows all that. He doesn't need anybody to tell him that. You can tell from his prayer that there's something very powerful about this experience for him. So as you look at the parable, let's note that 4 damning eyes are found in the prayer of the Pharisee. 4 times does he talk about himself. He stood by and says, my God, I thank you that I'm not like the others. I fast and I give 1/10 of all I get. That's the most common word in his prayer is I. Whereas I sense when I hear the prayer of the tax collector, I mean, it begins with those powerful, he daren't even look up. He is so conscious of his own need that he doesn't do that. Now, I think that this parable probably has a lot to say to many of us. There is no doubt that you don't need me to say which of these 2 characters here is the one who has the right attitude. You don't need me to tell you that. But perhaps all of us need to recognize that getting to that place where the Pharisee is where he is and the tax collector where he is takes often a lifetime of recognition on our part. For the tax collector, there was something very powerful. And the final words to me in this particular parable are the key to everything. I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. God, justified before God. Not justified before themselves, not justified before their friends, but justified before God. We heard earlier in the show of someone who really found their life at a point where it felt hopeless and helpless, and yet they found the hope which is Christ, which is not to say, I'm better than other people, I've suddenly got it all together, but recognizing need. And I think one of the things at Wesley Mission that we understand and that we're involved in every day is giving people dignity and worth and telling them that what matters is not that you feel you're better than other people, but the recognition that God is concerned about you and that God can give you meaning and purpose and hope. That to me is the greatest gift that we can give to anyone. It's the greatest purpose that Wesley Mission has always been about. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. This is the upside-down world of Jesus Christ that offers to you and to me enormous hope now and always.
If you would like to contact Keith and find out more about today's program, write to us at Wesley Mission, Post Office Box A5555, Sydney South 1235, or you can send an email to impacttv@wesleymission.org.au. On our website, you can catch up on past episodes of Wesley Impact, find out more about our work, read online magazines and articles, and connect with us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. You can also connect to Keith's blog and stay up to date on all of the latest news and information from Wesley Mission. wesleymission.org.au.
Over the years of Wesley Impact, Keith Garner has had hundreds of conversations sharing stories of hope, resilience, love, and the Christian faith. Perspectives on Faith and Sport is a collection of inspiring and insightful conversations with people who are champions in their field, including Commonwealth Games gold medalist Deb Lovely, tennis great Margaret Court, Olympic swimmer Elka Whalen, long distance runner Eloise Wellings, Olympic gold medalist Duncan Armstrong, and 2-time boxing world champion Nigel Benn. Each conversation shares a unique perspective on sport and the achievements of notable sporting greats, and collectively presents a broad cross-section of athletes and how their faith has changed their lives. Perspectives on Faith and Sport is the second instalment of a 3-part series and is available now from Wesley Mission. To find out more, contact Wesley Mission on 02 9263 5555 or email impacttv@wesleymission.org.au.
So please don't hesitate to be in touch and to follow us online and on our social media. Our email address is, and our website is, wesleymission.org.au. Now, on the show today, we've been joined by Elizabeth Moldovan, someone who describes herself as a prodigal daughter, who lived with drug addiction for 24 years while raising her family and also being married. And now, Elizabeth, before we leave today, if there's one thing you'd want to say to people who are battling with drug addiction, or perhaps a parent or someone who's in that difficult situation watching with us today, what would you say?
I would say seek help and only believe, and no matter how bad it is, no matter how dark, there's always hope. Where there's life, there's hope. I
think that's a wonderful word, hope, and one we share together. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Elizabeth and also found it stimulating to revisit the different postures of prayer in two very different people. I hope you can join us again next week for another episode of Wesley Impact TV. Thank you and God bless you, and be here next week and don't miss us.
Wesley Mission provides more than 550 care packages to people in need. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.